What was the Buddhist teaching that spiritually throat punched me? Tonight's lesson is drawn from the 39th verse of yong-jig xuan-jue's The Song of Enlightenment. Please chant with me. You cannot actively grab it and you cannot actively let it go. When you cannot find it, that is when you will find it. It speaks when it is silent when it speaks. When the gate of gifts opens, nothing stands in its way. Good evening, Steve. Glad you can make it. Oh, sorry, Stephen. In 1993, when the crust of the earth was still cooling, I was first exposed to the teaching, the passage from the Tao Te Ching, that explained that upon the path of knowledge, you add to your knowledge every day, but upon the path of wisdom, you let go of something every day. I was not expecting that. The only reason I was reading the Tao Te Ching is because I was hoping it could make me into a martial arts master. Boy, was I in for a surprise. And it found that teaching so shocking, it actually found it repugnant, like the scent of food that has gone bad. There is a dichotomy between the Buddha, who was known as Gautama, and his wicked cousin Devadatta. According to various sources, Devadatta's path could be described as the path of yang. The path of being rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. This is the path that most of us, including myself, were indoctrinated in. To be rigid, and to be controlling, and to be competitive, and to sincerely believe, you guessed it, if it's to be, it's up to me. Oh, good grief. Yes, that's what they told us. But Gautama's path was the path of yin, the path wherein one treasures being flexible, loving, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. So instead of being controlling, we're laid back. Instead of being rigid, we're flexible. And that includes personal growth and spiritual training. So I was raised to be active and to be enthusiastic and to be zealous, and that to be passive was wrong. In fact, in one spiritual organization, they called it being a momo. I don't know what that meant, but it didn't sound very positive. I was raised to actively strive to discover and not merely passively wait for revelation, for the clouds to metaphorically part and choirs of angels to sing me to greater insight. About 10 years ago, give or take, a woman told me that when it's time for the baby to come, the baby's going to come whether you're ready or not. Similarly, for those of us traversing the path of mindfulness and meditation, when insight comes, it's coming of its own accord, like vomiting when you have stomach poisoning. When it's time to vomit, you can't help it. It's coming. Or also, when you have stomach poisoning, explosive diarrhea, when it's time to go, you gotta go. The only question is, will you make it to the toilet on time? Similarly, when we plug into the primal forces accessible to us through our autonomic nervous system, when we plug into when, through the grace of each inhalation, we effortlessly and automatically access our sympathetic nervous system, And instead of actively concentrating, instead passively notice and do so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. That's how we plug in to this infinite source. But that's only one half the path. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we are accessing, spontaneously and involuntarily accessing our parasympathetic nervous system, which is wired for both physical relaxation and mental release. And this vulnerability and this release are like the magic elixir that grants us spontaneous wisdom, sometimes subtle, sometimes violent. It comes to us. It does not submit to our active exploration or our self-important demands, but it is as if it is poised like a cat outside a mouse's hole, waiting to give us the wisdom that we desire as we make ourselves open and vulnerable to it. I look forward to chanting and meditating with you this evening after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent more than 8 hours a day, every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you wouldn't have to. Welcome to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Let us return to the latest iteration of the Easy Proto-Zen Sadhana, or practice text. I'm not a big fan of praying to real or imagined celestial entities, for it makes petulant, mewling infants of us. Instead, I'm a big fan of using recitation to exercise the neural pathways responsible for empathy, for bodhicitta's empathy, and for the empathy of bodhicitta and the enthusiasm of refuge. To do that, we're going to use two versions. The first version is rather literal, and we're going to set it to a triplet chant together. May I liberate all quarter notes, beings from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging, by relying on thee. Buddha's example, instructions, and students. So what follows, so these three nouns have been so useful over the many centuries that they have earned the metaphoric nickname of the three wish-fulfilling jewels, kind of like Aladdin's lamp. This second and final pre-meditation chant is more concise and more figurative. We're going to set this recitation to the bookend, to the bookend chant, and we're going to perform it for 3 repetitions. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. May I liberate all beings by relying on the 3 jewels. For the remainder of this evening's live stream, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. Please do not wait until the end of the live stream, for my brains will turn to sleep buddy within an hour. Instead, please strike while the iron is hot. Let's bust a myth, or we can bust a move. The choice is up to you. But mindfulness and meditation are known by many names, such as Sati Passaddhi, Chan, Dhyana, Proto-Zen, Mahamudra, Mahasandhi, Ati Yoga, Dzogchen, and Trekchö. But it's still rock and roll to me. It's easy peasy lemon squeezy, despite the stomping and snorting of our more elitist friends. As children, the first bicycle we most likely received came with training wheels, which, although were clunky, got the job done. This evening's first contemplative exercise is going to be ungainly. Let's try this real quick. Let's make this bold. Here we go. During our inhalation, let us do two things. First, let us sit impeccably, creating a vertical traction between our tush and our head. Second, during our inhalation, let's silently and mentally recite the 12-syllable phrase, perceiving this very turbulent play of mind. During our exhalation, let's also do two things. First, let's physically relax as best we can. And second, let's silently and mentally recite, relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature. Let us remove the first of two metaphoric training wheels, reducing the length of our contemplative exercise. Oopsie, there's a question. Okay, so, and let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly or incorrectly. So is it Stevan? So Stevan, the three jewels is a metaphor that began in India. In the English phrase, three jewels, is a translation of the Sanskrit phrase, Tri Ratna, which means three jewels. So in Buddhist lore, in Indian mythology, There was a idea of a wish-fulfilling jewel, which functioned just like Aladdin's lamp. In the story, Aladdin picked up a lamp, he rubbed it, out came a genie who sounded remarkably like Robin Williams, who granted him 3 wishes and life lessons. Not to mention a catchy song or two. Similarly, a similar phenomena exists basically around the world. It's pretty much a human archetype, the idea of miraculous wish fulfillment. So that is a literal experience of a wish-fulfilling jewel. The metaphoric experience is this. If we want to be less of a bastard and more like the person that our dog already thinks we are, more of an asset to our neighbors and family members and society at large, our best self, so to speak, if there is such a thing, then relying upon the example of the Buddha, real or imagined, relying upon the teachings attributed to the Buddha, and relying upon good-hearted men and women who are sincerely striving to apply the teachings of the Buddha, these things can be so beneficial to us that when it comes to our spiritual journey, they act as if they were the wish-fulfilling jewels of lore. I hope that makes sense. If you've just joined in, welcome aboard. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. Please do not wait until the end to ask your questions. It's far more beneficial to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. So now we're going to shrink that exercise down from 12 syllables to 3. During our inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite, "Notice this." And during our exhalation, we could silently and mentally recite, "Relaxing." Now, as I mentioned during the opening lesson, every time consider, if you will, this couple right here, sporting in tantric union. The woman is the color of a fluffy cumulus cloud, and she reminds us of breathing in. Every time we breathe in, we automatically access our sympathetic nervous system, ensconced within our spinal cord, in the area that corresponds to our rib cage. And it's wired not to support active concentration, but instead to support merely noticing, and doing so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. Her date, this fellow is the color of the azure sky, and he reminds us of exhalation. For every time we exhale, we automatically access our parasympathetic nervous system, ensconced within the lower portion of our spinal cord, as well as the tippy top of the cervical region. And together, this parasympathetic nervous system is wired to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. And so we will see this image often in Buddhist tantric circles. And the 14th Dalai Lama taught that every Lama is his own sect. And there are many interpretations of this. But personally, I find this to be the easiest. That Samantabhadri reminds us to notice vulnerably as we breathe in. And Samantabhadra reminds us to physically relax and mentally release as we exhale. And now, let's remove the second of two metaphoric training wheels, reducing the length of our contemplative exercises from 3 syllables per breath down to just 1. During our inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this. And during our exhalation, we could silently and mentally recite the monosyllabic verb ease, which functions as a synonym of relax. Now that we've reached contemplative cruising altitude, together as a team, let us meditate as profoundly as Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo. There are many names for this couple here. We could describe them as the all-good mother and father sitting in tantric union. We could describe them in Sanskrit as Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri and Karma Mundara. Or we could describe them in Tibetan as Kuntu Zongpo and Kuntu Zongmo Yabyum. let us consider the nudity of Kuntu Zangpo Yabyum. Perhaps it could remind us of how very important it is to be vulnerable as we breathe in. Let us consider the translucence of Kuntu Zangpo Yabyum. It symbolizes, it reminds us that as we relax into our exhalation, whatever we notice during our inhalation could begin to feel as non-graspable as a vast empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, that although could be tantalizing to the eye, is experienced as being non-graspable to the hand. During the lesson, I mentioned yang and yin, spiritual patriarchy and spiritual matriarchy. There have always been people that loved elitism, that loved to make themselves feel important by making other people feel lower than dirt. However, as the Buddha lay dying, it is said that he proclaimed, "I've taught with an outstretched arm and an open hand, keeping no secrets." If somebody tells you that a teaching is too special for you, and if you read it, it could be harmful, either they're being lazy-minded, or they're lying. And there are ideas in a text which could threaten their sense of power, which is malarkey, isn't it? The beauty of Kuntu Zongpo Yabyum could symbolize the fringe benefit of our practice of mindfulness and meditation that generates the highest love, that is spontaneous and uncontrived. The abandon with which the all-good mother sports in tantric union reminds us that instead of being contrived, it is far better to be spontaneous. The peacefulness with which All Good Father sits reminds us that the highest spontaneity is not scattered, but centered. Let us consider the example of the Buddha, who did not have a series of 5-year plans, but instead allowed his choices and his utterances and his deeds to flow from love's centered spontaneity. As we consider Kuntu Zangpo Yabhyum, we observe that the man is passive and the woman is taking an active role. Come, let us transcend all forms of sexism and its preconceptions. The iconography of Kuntu Zangpo Yabhyun comes to us from India, where as a rule, most people are brunette. And yet we see she, who is the color of a cumulus cloud, depicted as possessing vermilion hair, or the hair of the color of coral. How does this come to be? In India, as women grow older and their hair begins to gray, many of them will rinse their hair with henna. And so at first there are subtle red highlights, and then eventually they have no more black hair left, and so their hair is completely red. This iconography could remind us that in tantric circles it was not unheard of for a post-menopausal widow to take for herself a young, strapping tantric partner. Come, let us transcend not only sexism, but ageism. And all our preconceptions surrounding sexuality. That when it comes to sexuality, the only real rule is do no harm. Remember, the moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, or Buddhist philosophy, to type your question in great detail in the chat window. I'll check for questions approximately once every 9 minutes. Here's a dead giveaway. If someone has to force their empathy, if they have to rely on contemplations to generate empathy, it is because they're not practicing mindfulness, they're practicing concentration, which is the quick path to great crankiness. When we replace rigid concentration with flexible mindfulness, love becomes an effortless byproduct. Whatever fear comes, let it come. Whatever fear stays, let it stay. Whatever fear fades, let it go. Let's seal this evening's practice with 2 chants, beginning with kind ethics that remind us of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. May all beings practice have kind communication, conduct, and calmness, flow spontaneous and uncontrived. May all beings practice have kind communication, conduct, and calmness, flow spontaneous and uncontrived. May all beings practice have kind communication, conduct, and calmness, flow spontaneous and uncontrived. Let us return to, let us remind ourselves of the 1st and 2nd folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path by chanting the 4 immeasurables. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. May everyone be free from misery, may everyone be happy, may no one be separated from the happiness. May everyone have balance from the tyranny of hating, craving, and clinging freed. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10 3/4 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.